Hi, my relatives. On today's episode of Our Storytellers, we're joined by Angie Dawson. Angie is a master weaver from here on the Squamish Nation. On the podcast, we talk about what it was like growing up here on the North Shore and what it looked like before it was developed, her journey to become a master weaver, her passion for education and an Indigenous lens on what that looks like. And it was an amazing conversation. It was nice to see her and Mom talk as well too. So this podcast is brought to you by our partners at the Indigenous Screen Office. And without further ado, please welcome to the Our Storytellers podcast, Angie Dawson.
Hello, my relatives. How are you? Here at Our Storytellers, we care about your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical well-being, which is why we want to inform you that this podcast discusses topics that may cause trauma to listeners and viewers. These subjects include mentions of Indian residential schools, assimilation, ongoing harm, colonial impacts, and much more. Our Storytellers recognizes the need to minimize risks associated with traumatic subject matter. The Hope for Wellness Helpline offers immediate help to all Indigenous people across Canada. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to offer immediate support and crisis intervention. Services are available in English and French, and in Nehiyaw, Anishinaabe and Inuktitut upon request. If you or someone you know are experiencing any harm, no matter how big or small it's perceived to be, you can call the toll-free helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or connect to the online chat at www.hopeforwellness.ca. Kinanaskaman, I'm grateful for you. Your ancestors are always with you. All my relations, Riel.
Well, thanks for coming through to hang out with us today. It means so much to hang out on a nice Saturday, and my name's Riel. I'm actually Métis from Nehiyaw and Soto background, so my dad and mom have been together since I was 10, 11 years old. So all my family, all my family comes back from Manitoba. That's where all my family is and stuff. But I've been living here for the past 6-7 years now. So the story goes, we got a grant for this project through the Indigenous Screen Office, who is kind enough to fund the honorarium for this podcast series, essentially. So we're super grateful for them, but we're super grateful for you to come and sit here. So we have this protocol here for you, just to pass it over a blanket and some tobacco and some honorarium. And when you're ready, just please introduce yourself in your own way.
Okay.
And we're flying.
Okay. It's the second time that I've been given tobacco because I work with a lot of Métis, and my there's only two of us that work in our head office here in Vancouver, and he comes from back east as well, Winnipeg. Yeah. So this is his teaching, and we went to ceremony, and I got two unfiltered cigarettes from them. I was like, wow, lucky I don't smoke.
yeah.
But I know it's an offering, from that his culture too. So it's been very interesting. So Halt Squile Tanoyaps, Spalakate Queen Quishamin, Squamish Okumel. My English name is Anjanette. My ancestral name is Spalakate, and that goes back 5 generations to my grandmother on my mom's side, and she was Squamish Jacob's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, let's tell us a little bit about how you grew up, essentially.
I don't want to give away my age, but I grew up down here on the Camalchistan Reserve, and when we moved down here we used to, apparently, but I don't remember, I think I was quite young, lived a brief time in Mission, on the Mission Reserve.
Oh, yeah.
And then eventually, I guess my parents relocated us here to Capilano, and we lived on the corner of Riverside and Matthias.
Mm-hmm.
So my late brother Bert and his family, their house is built where we grew up in a little wartime home, a 3-bedroom wartime home. There was 10 of us living in there, and I think two of the bedrooms were no bigger than this, and the third one was a little bit bigger. So bathroom was probably the half of the size of this. So all of those homes were given to the nation because after the war, the veterans, they all moved to the Norgate area. So
Yeah.
that's where all those wartime homes came from. And we all grew up in those homes on Matthias and Riverside. And that was it. There was no, this area was all forest at that time. We called it the pond because we would, there would be huge ponds back here, and in the winter they would freeze. So I remember going down there and ice skating, or in the spring and summer we'd come down here and we'd pick berries and saskies and things like that. So it looks very, very different from when I grew up. And I remember King's, I don't know if you remember that King's restaurant up on Marine Drive around where Denny's is or was.
Vaguely.
That was a big treat for us. And yeah.
What did they serve there? What was it?
It was just like a drive-in, like a 50s drive, hamburgers and fries and things like that.
Yeah.
So those old drive-in restaurants that you see on
The
TV
old
today.
A&Ws used to be when they had the roller skating up to it, but you'd drive your car. It was almost like a parking lot with a long
Yeah.
lane that they had. Everybody could park so the waitresses could come out and serve into the vehicles.
And now they drive your food right to you.
Yeah, the way around, exactly. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, they Uber it to the door now.
Yeah, DoorDash. Yeah. But I keep, when I facilitate workshops, I use some of our old pictures of when I grew up as to this is what it looked like, right? So there was like no Grouse Mountain at all at that time. We would go up, my late Auntie Terry would bring us up there and we would do berry picking and things up there on Grouse Mountain. And yeah, very different. Like I said, I see on social media people my age are saying, we knew that it was time to go home when the street lights would go on.
Yeah.
And our phones were up hanging on the wall. There were rotary phones.
With a 10-foot curly cord that always got tangled up because you were trying to pull it.
Yeah.
To privacy in a room and shut the door.
Yeah. And we were out all the time, at that time. I think what's there now, I can't even picture it, but I don't know the exact spot of where the preschool was at that time, the little one's preschool.
Yeah.
My grandparents on my mom's side, they were the ones that would clean it, and that's where at one time our summer fun program was run out of there. So the only leader that I can remember back then that were probably teenagers then was Jen Campo, was one of our camp leaders. And we would, it would probably cost us nothing, right, compared to today. Everything was done around in our area. We walked everywhere, whether it was like just balloon fights or water gun fights, or we would walk over to Ambleside and be at the beach all day. So it was very, very simple back then. I remember at the field we used to have sports days. There would be like sack races and races, field lacrosse and tug of war and things like that. Very, very old, and simple back then. And that's what I always try to encourage when I work for the nation is like, why do we have to spend this much money? Let's go back to the time when we didn't cost us probably anything. But we had fun.
Family-related things, more kind of allowing people to engage.
It's just simpler times, And now I could drive down Capilano or Matthias Road and you don't see a soul out. Whereas everybody, there was a lot of children my age and older than me at that time, and we were always out. And I was telling my kids when we first moved back in 94, I moved up north when I was 19 for 12 years and moved back in 94. And we would drive around Park Royal and heard the train one time. And I'm like, we used to swim under there all the time as a community. Right under the Silver Bridge, there would be a big, huge bonfire there, and everybody from the reserve would be there. And we would go down. It was actually my cousin Kathy Joseph reminded me on Facebook one day. I posted this old picture, and I don't know who took it, but my two older brothers are in that picture, and I can see myself and one of my sisters in there. I was probably like 6 years old at that time. And we used to go down there, and she was like, I remember going down there. put a potato in a tin foil and just put it by the fire, and we would swim all day, and when we'd get hungry we would have the potato.
Really?
I said, I remember that when she said it. Yeah.
Over here, under the bridge.
Yeah, under the Silver Bridge, and just in Ambleside area as well.
Wow.
We would go down there, but when we used to go down there for summer fun, we were probably crazy. I never even thought of it, because we, as children, with our leaders, we would get from our side to Ambleside side across the Silver Bridge. So when a train would come, there was these little cubbies there, and we'd jump in those cubbies.
Holy smokes.
As kids.
And wait for the train to go by.
Yeah, that's why those fences are up in there, so you can't go up there anymore. Yeah.
You'd never let your kids or grandchildren do it
No,
now.
no, but we did. I remember that so well, and I was probably less than 10 years old at that time.
Wow.
Somebody
I
would say
remember
train,
jumping
and we would all
trains.
jump in those the side parts of the bridge.
That is wild.
Yeah, and then, sometimes we would be down there as we got older. We'd watch everybody jumping off the bridge, and then there would be a couple of the guys, and the only one that I could remember was Lyle Williams Sr. They would jump from the top into the water there.
Wow.
With their runners on. Yeah.
That's what a different world.
Nope, yeah.
Doing these podcasts with the matriarchs in the nation, and I've been having such a good time doing it, but you really get a sense of just how crazy developed this place has become over the past, 50, 45, 30 years even,
Oh, yeah.
How much different it was. Today, when we were interviewing Gwen Harry, right away, right in the beginning, she pulls a picture out of the side drawer that shows her when she was growing up here as a little girl with all of her brothers and sisters, and it was just a field and forest everywhere here.
And that's how it was here.
Yeah.
Just behind our house, there was a little dirt road going behind all the houses, and he would just come out at the other end. Uncle Stan Joseph Sr.'s house was down the other end there, so that's where you'd come out.
Yeah.
And then just beside his house, there was a road going into where the preschool was, and that was all fenced off.
Wow.
And just around there, it was just all forest.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's honestly a little bit sad to see.
Yeah, the development, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the Capilano Road, where we have always called it the other side of the truck road, right? Because that's where all the trucks would come up and down to go down to the waterfront.
Right.
There was just 2 streets there as well. And then it kind of got more developed, and there was a driving range there, and in that driving range was just this little shack of like a little restaurant and arcade games and things like that. So that would be around down where, where the Lewis home is at the end of, is it Lawa or Wannock?
At the end of one, I think.
The late Dolores Williams Dolores Lewis and Willie
okay.
Lewis's home.
Okay.
Right there. Barry Lewis lives in there now.
Okay.
That was the last home on that street there, and then right out beside them it was all fenced off, and that's where the driving range was. And then going down where, whose home is across there? The Bakers now, I think, late Margot Bakers. From her down to probably where Uncle Gordon Jacob's house is, that's where the road ended, and then there was just a little street, and that's where the entrance to the driving range and the little shack where all the
Crazy.
pinball-
That's wild.
And then around all of that was just forest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Hey, my relatives. Super quick pause in this episode of Our Storytellers just to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by our partners at the Indigenous Screen Office. The Indigenous Screen Office supports Indigenous narrative sovereignty through storytelling on screen. They provide grants to small podcasts like us to support our growth and to support the guests that we can have come on. Big thanks to them. Please check them out on Instagram. Please check out their website. You never know, there might be an opportunity for you on there, especially if you're creating content. Get out there and check them out. Thank you so much to our partners at the Indigenous Screen Office. Back to the podcast. So how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 8.
8.
Yeah, my parents lost their oldest when she was 5 from pneumonia.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would have been the late 50s when they lost her.
Mm-hmm.
And then just lost my two brothers in the last maybe 10 years, 11 years. The oldest has been gone, and then the second oldest has been maybe 5 years, 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the youngest of 9.
You're the youngest of 9.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mom like?
Well, both of my parents went to residential school,
Mm-hmm.
so they were both survivors of residential school. So it was a typical home of parents that didn't have any skills of being a parent. They were functional alcoholics most of their life, but they worked. They were employed all of my life. I don't ever remember them not working. My father was an alcoholic because I think he went through a lot of trauma in residential school, but he never ever talked about it.
Yeah.
But whatever he never ever dealt with, he could only deal with alcohol. So my mom was an alcoholic off and on. And then eventually I think when she started working for the nation, kind of settled down a little bit more, and she got to work.
Yeah.
With the education department. She was a curriculum developer. But during probably the early 80s, there were a group of other colleagues and I think non-Indigenous people that started talking about residential school. So probably around 80, 81, that was the time that she really got busy with that project. And then she sat on council as well. So it consumed a lot of her time at that time. And I was probably 14, 15 years old around then. So I never really saw her at that time because she traveled a lot. And what her and those colleagues had done were they went and traveled all over Canada, and they went to other Indigenous communities, and they started talking about residential school. And I think at that time was probably the first time anybody had ever brought up the history and the trauma of residential school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the work she started, because I remember when she used to come home that you could really see how much it was weighing on her of hearing the stories that other Indigenous people across Canada had started talking about residential school.
So just for people in the audience, share who your parents' names were.
The late Chief Lois Gus and Albert Gus, and my grandparents here in Squamish were the late Lena Jacobs and Alfred Jacobs.
Did they go to St. Paul's?
St. Paul's.
Yeah.
Yeah, both of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been finding people have been in different ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
And that's what happened to my dad.
Right, they ended up here.
Separated.
And they could end up as far as Lytton or Kamloops.
Yeah.
And sometimes farther, but those are some of the schools that we've been hearing. St. Mary's as well, Cocolitza.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of.
So my mom, and she's the oldest of 7, and all of her and her siblings went to St. Paul's residential school. But my mom, my dad's mom, she was a Trimble from the Nishka, from Kincolith.
Right.
So her and her sister, who happened to be Caroline Thomas, married down Tsleil-Waututh. So that would be Byron, Auntie Nani, Auntie Barbie. That would be their mom. Right. So my mom, my dad's mom, and the late Byron Joseph, their moms were sisters from up north, and they slowly migrated down here. And to be honest, still trying to sort out my dad's family tree, because his family was totally separated because of residential school. So I think by the time my dad was born, him and his full brother would be Uncle Boydie Gus from Burrard. Yeah. And then he had a full sister. I only knew her as Pinky. I don't know what her full name was. Yeah. Because right after residential school, she married down in the States. So her family is actually are starting to find all of us here in Canada now.
So did they become part of the Seattle
she did.
people down there? Because we have quite a significant group of our
so she ended up passing away down there.
Yeah.
She never, ever did come back to Canada. My dad, I don't think, saw her at all after she moved away. So that's where it kind of severed ties on my dad's side with his siblings.
Lots of them that went there didn't really return
Yeah.
here, did they? Because my grandmother's twin sister married down there. And
never ever saw her.
Don't think so, because, you know, growing up, I don't remember meeting her. And, you know, my grandmother did die when we were very, very young, so that also didn't contribute to keeping in touch with people that were much farther away, like down there. So.
And I remember there was no real border at that time either.
Well, of course, they just.
We used to go see my late Auntie Renee, who would have been Byron, the oldest sibling of Byron, moved down there and lived in Seattle all of her life. So remember when she was probably one of the first ones in our family to get and earn her degree. So what the nation did was they rented a bus for all of us and brought all of us down there to see Auntie Renee earn her degree.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
and
exciting.
I remember there was really like no border when we went across. I don't remember having to produce any type of ID to go across or go see her back then.
We traveled a lot to do berry picking across back and forth. It was very common to spend summers down there.
Yeah. And then, what year would that have been? Maybe 2004, 2003? There was a ceremony happening down Capilano Longhouse. And my sister and I were both visiting my dad, and this was late in the evening, like 10 o'clock. It's late to my dad anyway. He shuts down at that time, right? Nobody ever comes around after a certain time, But we were visiting, and then there was a knock at the door, and he looks at my sister Avis and I, and he's like, who in the hell can that be? You know, everybody called him Archie Bunker because that's how he was, right? But he was a nice Archie Bunker to everybody that he was nice to, right? And I was like, I have no idea. I'll go see. So I opened the door, and it was my cousin Evie, that would have been Auntie Yvonne and late Willard Joseph's daughter, was standing there. And there was like a whole bunch of people behind her, and I'm like, oh, hi. And she's, we just came from a ceremony down the Longhouse. I can't remember whose ceremony it was. And she said, these people behind me, she said, they're family. So after the ceremony, she said they were on the floor because it was just packed on there after, I guess. And they were going around the Longhouse asking if they knew my dad. And then they met Evie, and she said, that's my Uncle Shano. He just lives up the road. You want to meet him? You know how Evie was? So they showed up at my dad's house, and there's like 8 or 10 of them, and they just, his living room is quite small, so they just filled his living room. And one of her sons actually was, or maybe it was her grandson, I don't remember, but he explained the history of family ties. So their mother was in residential school and born before my father was, which he didn't even know. And she married, her name was Veronica Dick in Port Alberni.
Wow.
So this was her family, and he's like, what?
And that was his
didn't even
older
know,
sister.
He didn't even know he had a sister.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were introducing each of them, and then they left some information with me after that. But I still have it, but it's all changed since then, so we kind of lost touch. So that's what I mean, my dad's family, the ties were severed with his family after. And then we had Uncle Jock was his brother, half brother as well. And then my grandmother migrated when my dad was still in residential school. When he was released from there, she had left my dad's dad and married a Charlie up in Chilliwack, so she has 3 kids up there, who we probably wouldn't have any ties to, and you know, my mom kept that relationship with them. Right. So that's where my gran ended up living, and the Danny Charlie, who she ended up marrying up there, because I was so young, he was just a grandfather to us. Yeah,
Charlie's are a big family up there. Our family is, through our Stolo family, is connected to them.
In Chehalis, and our Charlie family are in a different reserve, like downtown. There's a reserve. I can't remember what that.
Oh, there's a few. There's Squay and.
Oh, Squaw Reserve.
Squaw. There's Thomas's and others there too. That's where our grandmother Eva was from.
Oh, okay.
Her and her sister were from there.
Oh, okay.
And I think their mother was Mary Williams. I'm pretty sure that's what her name. So they're Williams family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Squaw was a small reserve.
Yeah.
Too, right?
Yeah.
So there's Squaw and Squay, and then farther out the other way is Squayala, and then heading to Chilliwack.
Chehalis.
Yeah. So they got there's 24 separate bands
Oh, okay.
within Stalo, but some of them are quite close together.
Yeah.
And which, when you kind of go through the city of Chilliwack, you start to see in proximity where some of them are. Some of them are a little farther out when you start to get to Seabird and Chiam and the other ones. Yeah.
So my mom kept that relationship going because if she didn't, then my dad he wouldn't have given a damn, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but we'd go see my grandmother in Chilliwack and visit with family up there, and
Right.
because he felt abandoned by his mom, because when he got out of residential school, he went back to the house where they were living before he went into residential school,
there
and
was
she
no-
packed up and left him, and there was just like no relationship after that,
Wow.
until my mom actually kept it going. But the only way that he could go up there was if he was drunk. He could never see my grandmother when she was sober, because when she would come down, she would go visit everybody else, but she wouldn't reach out to my dad, and it was
No.
really
was
hurtful for him.
Yeah, very hard for him.
Yeah.
She rejected him or
Yeah.
didn't accept
Never
him.
had a relationship with him, and that's probably what happened to Veronica on the island as well.
Right.
Yeah, so he was on his own when he got out of residential school, and the only story that he shared with me was because I used to go to swap meets with him every Sunday when I moved home. So
Yeah.
he'd come and wake me up at 6 o'clock, and he would say, "Andrew, we're gonna go swapping today." So I'd have to get up, and we'd be out the door by 7 and head out to Abbotsford and Cloverdale.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah.
What's a swap meet?
A swap meet is like a giant garage sale.
Okay.
You're going to have a mixture of people that bring kind of packaged new things to sell that are like
Like a
kind of
flea
below dollar
market.
Yeah,
store,
yeah.
flea market style.
Yeah.
And then you got all people that bring their things like they would sell at a garage sale. And they sell
Gotcha.
tables, so.
Or some
Gotcha.
is just like junk.
Exactly.
But they're
I didn't want to
treasures
say
to them.
junk,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But a lot like
There's
the
a lot
men
like
of
that.
like tools and parts
Lots
and
of
Yeah.
tools,
yeah, and some of it's really ancient, not worth a penny. So,
Yeah,
but they
yeah.
try and sell it.
And sometimes there's a few jewels in there. You're like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
So, but you really have to look through everything. It's like going thrift store shopping. You gotta
Yeah.
be prepared to be there for
and
hours.
dig around.
The entertainment is part of the process of going to those things.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So we were driving down 3rd Street one morning, and we were going down 3rd Street Hill. So this was quite early in the morning, so wasn't quite dark, or it was like light out. It was still a little bit dark. So we were
Yeah.
driving down 3rd, and something triggered him, and that's when he started. When I left residential school and I went home, and my mother wasn't there, and
Wow.
packed up Boydie and moved up to Chilliwack with her and left me here. He said that's how he put it.
Wow.
But, he said when the residential school let him go, they kept him all day and sent him home at dinner time, after dinner time. So it was dark.
Oh.
So he went down to the house and nobody was there.
And
And
it
he
was
was
dark.
like, where can I go now? And the only person that he could think of was our Granny Butsy, who was Caroline, my grandmother's sister, who had married down in Tsleil-Waututh. So that's where he went.
Quite a
and
distance.
he had to
for-
walk from
Yeah.
residential or mission all the way down
All
to
the way-
Tsleil-Waututh.
Wow.
And there were no street lights. The roads weren't
No.
paved at that time. He said he remembered walking down 3rd Street Hill because it was there at that time, but it
Well,
was a dirt road.
A dirt road,
but it
and
was-
it would have been very steep and dark.
Yeah, so it was
without
forest all the way
Yeah.
down to Tsleil-Waututh with a sporadic coal oil lamp on, I guess, in the tree. So that was his guide down
lights. Wow.
to Burrard, and he showed up down there, and he said my brother was already down there. Uncle Jock was already. So Carol, my Granny Butsy, we called her Granny Butsy because I was really young when, she was still looking after him, and he was part of that family. They were more family to us than my dad's real family.
Yeah.
So they just took him in. And
Yeah,
made
my
sure-
gran took him in, and at
Yeah.
16 years old, and
Well, it must
went
have
to
been
work
really
right
hard for
away.
him,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
He went to work right away.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
16, he worked decades. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And then, so what was Grandma Butsy like?
Oh, she was very, very loving, tender person. Never heard her shout or yell once at anybody. My gran was like that too. And when I'd see my dad's mother together, they were both just so gentle, gentle people. But the thing that I really missed out on was the family tree stuff, because back then nobody ever talked about family ties, right? You
Right.
always knew and assumed that they were family because they were there, right? But we didn't know the connection, so that was a real loss back then. Nobody ever talked about it.
Not the same way.
Not on my dad's side, but I knew on my mom's side, because that's who we grew up with.
Yeah.
All of her siblings and all of their children.
And
because
they
we
made sure
were-
you knew them all.
Yeah,
Like you-
and we did, because
Yeah.
we all played sports together. So we grew up and we traveled all over BC playing fast pitch together, which were great times in my life for years. So
Baseball was big down here, eh?
fast pitch,
Fast
actually.
Fast pitch,
Is
yeah.
it was it? I don't know.
Baseball's overhand, fast pitch underhand.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha,
so
gotcha.
it was actually Lance Baker who became the director of recreation at the time when I was 12 anyway,
Yeah.
at that time. And he was the one that introduced fast pitch here to us as children. So the only tournament that we had to go at that age was one in Victoria. So we would go over to Victoria every year
Nice.
as youth and play. So, and then from there it just progressed to either the North Van Bells or the Skyliners.
Mm.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, so I played up until I was 19 years old.
Did you like going to school? Like,
Elementary, I probably did, because Norgate was there when I grew up. My older three siblings went to day school, and then as we came down in age, we were all put into public school. So when I started, it was at Norgate, and I have an old black and white picture of when I was probably 6 years old, and it was a mixture of ages because I recognize everybody in there, and some of them are older than me, but we were all probably a primary class at that time. And as I got older, there were probably like 300 students there at the time, maybe even a little bit more, but still like similar today is that Squamish kids outnumbered everybody there. So if there were 300 of us there, 250 were Squamish.
mm-hmm.
Right.
So I knew everybody that was there, and that's where all of my siblings were. So I had fun in elementary, I guess, what I can remember. There was still racism, even though the population of non-Indigenous were there. There was still racism there. But if I got picked on or certainly called names and stuff like that was in elementary, I could go to my brother.
Mm-hmm.
They
And I
were
remember
close
him
enough and-
sticking up for me. It was like, you don't talk to my sister, and don't call her this and don't call her that. So I always had that in my life when I was in elementary, but it was very different in high school for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at that time, we all kind of figured out that our parents didn't care about school. It's like we went, but as we got older and up in grade, it just became less and less because my parents, I certainly can speak for, was just like, are you going to school or are you going to stay home, right? Are you going to school today or not,
Yeah.
That was their attitude. It wasn't important to them at that time. And of course, I'm a teenager. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go today. But even if we did, sometimes you'd get off the bus at Capilano Mall there, and then you look where Hamilton was. That's
Yeah.
a steep hill that you had to walk up every day. So
Yeah, I don't feel
yeah, I
like
don't want to hike that hill today, or especially in the winter time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when it's raining and ugly, you don't want to go in those times. So, everything was transit for us. There was no transportation for us whatsoever at that time. And
Yeah, not like we drive our kids to school.
yeah,
these
do
days.
everything. Well, I did everything for my kids after. So I think because of that experience, I paid for it in the end because I so wanted to go back to school and earn my degree. But the barrier was that I didn't have my grade 12. And I couldn't get funding anywhere at that time because you had to have your grade 12,
Mm-hmm.
which was a huge barrier because of policy. So
Yeah, because they didn't cover the upgrading of things,
Yeah.
did they? It
They're-
took, I think they made upgrading to grade 12 free at a certain point in the communities. You could
Mm-hmm.
go and take, like in any community and take it, but it took a really long time for
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, the upgrading piece was huge.
yeah. So then I realized, I want to have these goals for myself, but I did it to myself, right? And I don't want to put my children in that position because it was really tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And until the policy changed within our own nation,
that took
that
a while.
yeah, that policy was got rid of and changed and taken out. So I went back to school when I was 50 years old, and at that time it was because reconciliation was becoming huge at that time, and working for the nation in the education department, there were certain topics and subjects that had to be implemented in the curriculum, and nobody knew how to implement it or create it. So we got busy at that time getting calls from schools and teachers for that support, and there was only myself and a post-secondary
Yeah.
counselor at that time, and then our language department. That was it, right? So we got flooded with all of these calls, and then I think the school district was as well. Brad Baker was the district principal for School District 44 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think he was probably getting a lot of those requests from the staff within the district as well. So what School District 44, Simon Fraser University, Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish, what they did was they struck up a committee and they created a grad diploma program, a reconciliation program. And then that was sent out for a call of expressions of interest. And that was my opportunity. So I went back as a mature student and got my grad diploma through SFU. And through that time, over the 2 years, I was working full time and I was going to school every Tuesday evening. Luckily, SFU came here to North Van.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to travel to Burnaby,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a lot of work
Oh my
because I was
gosh.
still
Yeah.
doing my own job plus going to school every Tuesday and all this assignments
To
and
get
readings
the
and
upgrading and get it
yeah,
done.
my grad diploma.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but when the call came out, they were having an information session. The two instructors that were going to be instructing the course,
Right.
they held an evening at Oslahan. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to go by myself. So Jessie Williams was a post-secondary counselor at that time, and she said, "You want me to go with you?" And I said, "Yeah." So we went after work because it was in the evening. We showed up, and the two instructors were there, and we were the only four there.
Mm-hmm.
And then another teacher from the school district showed up there. So that was it. And I'm like, well, where is everybody? Right? And then they went and did the same thing with Tsleil-Waututh. So they had no interest from the two communities, and that's who they were creating this for.
Trying
An
to focus
opportunity
on
to go
them.
back to school and educate them and hopefully getting them into the education system, but nobody showed up.
Really?
So I got the call from Simon Fraser University, and they said we had like zero interest other than the people that showed up. Well, I said, well, what are you going to do now? You can't just stop there. I said, open it up to everybody then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what they did, and the course filled right up from, like, we had students or teachers from the Sunshine Coast traveling over every Tuesday. She would come
Wow.
from Squamish, from Tawasin, so from all over.
So you started to get the
Interest,
the interest
yeah.
that would come.
Yeah. So I was lucky. When they started the program, we started it off at the Seymour Longhouse with ceremony, and the course was given a Squamish name and a Tsleil-Waututh name, and it's just an exposure for the other students to have that experience in ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you completed the program?
Oh, I was so happy. But the second year, through our second year of the program, maybe halfway through, SFU brought in some instructors to apply for master's programs at Simon Fraser University. I'm like, what are the title of these programs? They were educational, but they were not Indigenous.
Mm.
And I said, I don't want to go back to a non-Indigenous program. I said, been there, done that.
Yeah.
And I'm working in it, right? So I said, you need to create a master's program that is complementing this one at the master's level.
Yeah.
Right.
So in that committee, the two people that were representing Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh, I knew. So I went and talked to them, and I said, when you meet, you need to advocate for them to create a master's program with the same content in it, right? So, and then I knew the people from the district as well, because I was already working with them, and went and told them the same thing. So when Vicky and Paula went and met with that committee, they were encouraging them, you need to go back to SFU and create a master's program
Yeah.
for reconciliation. So by Christmas, Paula and Vicky came back, and before we broke for Christmas, she said, Vicky said, oh, I have some news to share with you before we go on the Christmas break and come back in the new year. And she looks at me and she said, you're a brat. And she said, you got your wish. SFU has agreed to create a master's program.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a sweet story.
Yeah.
Good on SFU too. I'm happy that they did that.
Yeah, so now I'm pushing them to create a PhD program, because there's one at UBC, but I really don't want to take it through UBC. I want it to be Simon Fraser University, because they created those programs, and the instructors that taught the course, they were just amazing people.
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't, I hate to say it, I don't feel comfortable at UBC. I think because of the dynamics with Squamish and Musqueam, I hate to say.
Yeah.
Because I know the politics that are involved with UBC and that nation.
And they have there's an issue out there.
Hey,
Yeah.
we're an SFU family. We stay loyal to SFU.
Yeah. So
I got
taught.
my degree at the U of A and moved
Oh, yeah.
on to Manitoba.
I
So
forgot about that.
I'm not sure. Like going across the mountain and taking Indigenous-based courses. Like I started my first 2.5 years at Musqueam. Totally immersive Indigenous worldview learning. And then on to U of A. Definitely some, when you talk about UBC and Musqueam, there's a relationship issue there. Within the U of A there is too, because I got through the bachelor's program, but it took me a year to get the faculty on board and to actually get, supported to get help and get in, which I did. And then when I went to do my master's and register for it, again, it was an issue. As soon as I registered at the University of Manitoba, they come back and they said, you need a supervisor. I said, I don't know who your instructors are. They actually sent me a professor who looked at my thesis stuff, and she sent me an email about a day or so later and said, can we meet? And I met her, and then all of a sudden it was like a Zoom meet. Everything went through, and it was all, good. And they offered me, that she would be the mentor, and all the registration stuff just ticked through really, really easily. I went back at U of A again. Took months to get them to come through, and finally at the last minute when their deadline was, then they finally came through and helped support the tutor.
And that's the issue I had. I applied for other PhD programs,
right?
but I couldn't, well, I'm not going to say I couldn't find a supervisor. There was nobody there that would be able to support me because I'm Indigenous. And my route would have been Indigenous education.
Oh,
But
yeah.
all of the other,
very specific, right?
supervisor, they would be non-Indigenous because they didn't have Indigenous people on board. And that was a huge barrier for me.
Absolutely.
So I'm always on social media online with both universities, is that just because this is the barrier for Indigenous students, then you have to figure it out. So it's not like that I sit back and I'm quiet and I'm waiting for something. I'm creating something for myself and others, because I said the interest is out there, right? And they just started a PhD program at UBC. They had some online information sessions. So I was one of the first group that went through that process and listened and heard about the program. So before they signed off, I said, how many more of these info sessions are you have? And they said, we have 4 of them scheduled, and they're all full. So you're looking at like 80, 90 individuals interested in this PhD program. 15 people are going to be selected. Right. So, and then I'm like, well, I can wait because it's not really what I'm looking for anyway. So I'm going to create it myself. So I put it out there, and I guess a few enough, they're going to create it for me.
They'll get it done.
Yeah.
Because
just a
it's
question of
important for
timing,
me
right?
to be Indigenous based, right? Because I don't want a non-Indigenous instructor up there, I'm going to say, preaching at me about education when it's not my truth, right? And I was really lucky to be in the Grad Diploma and the Master's program. I showed up down at Seymour on the day of the event, and I knew some of the teachers that were in the course with me, and they were, happy to see me, and they were hugging me, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Are you teaching the program? And I said, no, I'm a student. I was accepted, and they were laughing. I said, although I could probably teach it, right? But throughout that 2 years of the grad diploma and then the master's program, I certainly did support Vicky and Paula, because Vicky's a Métis as well, and Paula's non-Indigenous. So any topic that, I was able to contribute with about lived experiences and working with our students in the system, I was able to share that and how we approached a lot of those scenarios.
Yeah. It seems like you're a person that, pardon my French, would just get shit done. How did you learn how to get, was that always natural in you? Or?
I think it's because, in the earlier part of our conversation was when you had asked about how my parents felt about school. It's like they didn't give a shit, right?
Yeah.
But I knew that affected me in the long run, and I didn't want that for my kids. And growing up the youngest of 9 children, of course, my older siblings started having children. So what happens to the youngest is you're a built-in babysitter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So
Either the oldest or the youngest is always the babysitter.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of relationships and a lot of parenting styles over my time. And I knew, in my heart that, if ever I get married and have my children, it's going to be so different for them. I knew that.
Yeah.
And I was just so lucky and fortunate that that's what Creator brought me, because when I met my husband, his parents were residential school survivors as well, and they went to St. Mike's in Alert Bay.
Yeah.
And they both had a lot of trauma in that school as well. And when we eventually went, I think when he felt comfortable in talking about it, this is the story that I shared with him, that when we started having our kids, is that this is how I want, how I see it. Yeah. And he had the same wish, is that because he grew up in a violent home, that when I have kids, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we already had that goal. Yeah. So when my kids, like you said, when they started going to school, I had the van through their entire schooling, because I'm not just transporting and driving and picking up my own kids. It was their friends as well, because they're being and having worked in the system for so long. I saw how many parents were not supportive of their children, not with only school and education, but it's after school stuff as well. So I was busy all the time. My son was very independent, but it was my daughter, because she's a girl, who I really catered to with all her friends. And there was never any after school program or anything for them to do, because we're here, and all the rec centers, I always say, they're up the hill. There was never anything built down here. So anything that Delbrook in that area had to offer, they would have to go up there.
Right.
And when my daughter, in grade 7, explained to me one day, was that we want to go up to this program, but we'll all have to walk up there. And that's when I joined the District of North Van's Recreation Committee. And that's what I said, is you need to figure it out then, because they were offering programs at Norgate, but then they would offer more at Delbrook. But I said, you're making 12-year-old kids walk from Norgate all the way up to there, because they don't have parents that are going to drive them. They don't have bus fare.
Yeah.
Right. So I would bring
Barriers
van
to
loads with me up
accessibility.
there. Yeah. And drop my daughter off and all of her friends and pick them up at the same time.
Right.
Yep.
So looking at even, in my day of growing up here, I never even noticed or realized until I had my own children, of just the lack of opportunities we had here. again, sitting on that committee with district people within recreation of like, we want to build something down, but where, down this way, but where can we? And everything's developed. And I'm like, well, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
It's not my fault, right?
Yeah.
It's just poor planning on your guys' part. Now you want us to look at some property that
Or
we can build
deliberate
something
planning.
here. Yeah, I said, why don't you tear something down and build something?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Why are we always having to get up and accommodate?
Hi, my relatives. If you're enjoying this podcast, or if you have any feedback on this podcast, please let us know, because we're always trying to get better at the same time. But especially if you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think we have some really cool projects coming out that you might want to check out. Please follow us on Spotify. Share our reels as well too. That helps us out so much. And yeah, just check us out. Share the word. We're working really hard to keep this content coming for you. And the support helps us out so much, and we're so grateful. Thank you so much for listening. Back to the podcast.
So, at what point in your life do you start to learn to weave?
Probably 2003, I think I was introduced.
Mm-hmm.
So my teachers are Willard Buddy Joseph and Chief Janice George.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to across the border, and I've been to a couple of the weaving conferences down there, and they're huge, but
Yeah,
majority of
I've
them
heard
are cedar weavers.
Yes.
But there was one table that was set up with a family of wool weavers, and sitting behind the table was their teacher. Her name is Susan Pavel. So they went, and a shawl or a blanket caught their eye, and they were asking her how much it would cost to buy it. And she said, oh, it would be cheaper for you to make your own, learn and make your own. So that was the offering.
Mm.
Right.
So she apprenticed them, and they went down there. But I can't honestly say how long that apprenticeship was.
Yeah.
But when they came home with the knowledge, I was still working for the education department at that time, and our director was our late Deborah Jacobs. So she hired them, and they had some looms made, and my first experience was at the Capilano Little Ones preschool. So we made small tunics for all of the children that were going to that school, because they were having ceremony and events, but they didn't have regalia.
Right.
So I made 2 little tunics for them. That was my first experience at weaving, and it was like I'd been doing it all my life.
Yeah.
It just came so easy and quickly for me, and it was like I was weaving that week before, right? That's how I
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah.
So when I was weaving,
You're
Buddy
connected to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Buddy and Jan approached me, and they said, well, we're looking at securing a grant because we knew that we were getting the Winter Olympics here in Vancouver in 2010. So they were trying to secure a grant, and they were also in talks with the Olympic Committee for the Squamish Cultural Center.
Mm-hmm.
So they were having all other types of art in that building, but there weren't going to be any weavings because there were no weavers here. So
Right.
they said, if we apprentice 10 weavers, can we hang some pieces in the cultural center? So the answer was yes. So now they had to go out and look for grants for the looms and the projects.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I didn't hear back from them for probably over a year. And then they came knocking at my door, and they said, we got the grant, we're getting the looms made now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I'd forgotten all about it, right? And they told me what they had in mind. And I said, oh, yeah, now I remember. I said, but I haven't touched a loom in over a year.
Yeah.
So they came back with this collapsible loom and dropped it off with some wool and supplies, and that was it.
You just
So
got started.
I
Off
knew
to
how
the
to set the
races.
loom up, but
Yeah.
I didn't remember how to warp it up. I forgot all the terminology with the weaving, all the techniques. So I did my best.
Practice to get.
I tried.
You gotta try to
I
get.
tried. But
Yeah.
I was so nervous because I said, oh my God, I forgot everything. What am I going to do when we do start weaving? I know nothing. So then they came back and they said, we have the looms made now, so we're going to start down Chief Joe Matthias, because I think their studio was being built at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 10 of us, our looms were set up down there, and we had a a meeting, and I'm like, I was quite really intimidated by the other women that were there, because some of them were artists in different ways,
Yeah.
and I wasn't in any other way.
Right.
So we're sitting there, we're having conversations, but after a while, because I knew them, but we were acquaintances, we weren't friends or anything like that, because we're all from different families.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're all having the conversation there, and then what we all kind of discovered is like we're all beginners. So, but then Buddy and Jan threw another ball at us and said that we had to create our own pattern. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that either, God. So what happened was that there was a couple others that weren't comfortable in doing it again anyway, or creating their own. So they decided to have two blankets, and then having a pattern down here, and then they were going to connect, so it would be one huge blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So two of us partnered up.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So
Right.
one was weaving, one.
Yeah, so it's just like diamonds and triangles.
Yeah.
So one was cut in half, that they would all both connect in the middle. there.
Gotcha.
But because of our attention, they don't look
Match.
yeah, exactly. But they were all beautiful blankets, and
Yeah.
they're still hanging up at the cultural center. So,
Oh, amazing.
but we had 6 months. We were commissioned 6 months to do that. So that was working full time again with the nation,
Yeah.
and then going into the studio for a few hours after work, and then hours and hours on the weekend to get the project done.
Wow.
Yeah. It was exciting. It was very, very exciting to be part of that.
So about how long does it take to weave a blanket that would be?
If I just sat at the loom and had the luxury of just sitting there and having the time and day to do that, it probably could get one done in less than a month or two.
Right.
Yeah, that would be like a 5x6 blanket.
Right.
That would be working like it would be a full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
weaving
just
up.
sitting there weaving. Yeah, but because your responsibility of work and weaving, yeah. Because after that, I was again picked up for commissions with blankets that are hanging at Simon Fraser University.
Mm-hmm.
So I have two there, and they were like 68 inches by 72 inches, I think.
Right.
And we had 4 months to do those.
And then, like, as you're weaving, are you learning about, because before this started, we were talking about, like, how you teach about how specific materials and resources would be used for traditional dyes and stuff like that. Like, are you just grabbing little pieces of knowledge on the way? Is that kind of how it
What
works?
we did as weavers back then, when there were 10 of us,
Yeah.
and our only teachers were Buddy and Jan, we were self-taught basically.
Yeah.
But on our own, but maybe as a group as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes whoever showed up at the studio, or whoever was there at the same time that I was, if we were stuck, we had to rely on each other for those teachings. Knowledge, going home and just trial and error at home as well. It was all self-taught.
Wow.
Because if we're at the studio and Buddy and Jan are somewhere else, they were not available to us 24/7.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the way that I was, and that's how I teach today. It was like, I'm not going to sit here with you for 2 hours on your own when I have 24 other people in the room.
Right.
Right? It's trial and error, and everybody makes mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I said, if you look at some of my pieces, I probably have mistakes in there, but you just don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Right? So you get more comfortable in that because you develop your own creativity and your own techniques with the weaving.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes we would all be at the studio, and because we were all new weavers, we would look online, and some people would print patterns and things like that, and we would just sit around as a group and look at them and like, how in the hell did they do this, right?
Yeah.
Without the technology and instruments that we have of today.
Yeah.
And they don't even have the proper machinery to create the looms that we have that should be so balanced and perfect, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Right, you look at old pictures, they're just looking at a tree and say, oh, that'll make a good piece for this side, and this one will make a good post for this side, and then tie
you start
a
to
branch
do
on
it.
top with sinew or cedar rope, and then tie another one down the bottom and attach it. So they're not perfectly balanced or symmetrical in any way, but their blankets came off perfect, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Mastery
wild.
of a skill that, yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a master weaver, and she did cedar baskets, hats, everything. It's but she weaved every day.
Yeah.
You know, when I ask any of the siblings, that's what they said. She just did it every day, a little bit. Worked on
If I had the space
always
and time, I
working on a
probably
project,
would
right?
too. Yeah.
Well,
Do you-
weaving, I think on those are bigger scale, right? Often
It's tough I'm not going to say cedar weaving is tough on the body, but wool weaving is. Because
cedar
when
weaving
we
is too.
when we started on the looms, they were probably 8 feet by 9 feet. Those looms, and the dowel and the top and the bottom were probably that big, right? Because
Yeah.
they had to be able to hold the tension that and stand through all of that tension we were putting on the strands. Because when we warped up, there's probably almost 400 or 500 warps on those blankets for Whistler. But when we warped up, it was like we were pulling on that strand that it was pulled on so tight that it went from like the width that it was to less than half of it. That's how tight the tension was.
Okay.
But then it had to sit there for a couple of weeks to loosen up a little bit so that we could move the middle bar down and start weaving. And if it wasn't ready that way, you had to wait.
I wish I knew what weaving is so I can understand a little bit more. But
Yeah.
I kind
So
of
much
think
of
I
it has to
understand.
do with tension and
Yeah.
being able to ensure that, like, if you have all your strands and one of them is loose,
Yeah.
that's going to throw your weaving off, right?
Yeah.
All the strings have to have the same tension.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes when they first do that, it's very tight, so you have to allow it to relax.
It depends on how long it's going to be sitting on the loom. So if I'm on a commission and they want it in a month, my tension's not going to be that tight because I know I'm going to be on that loom every day. But the longer it sits on the loom, the tension lessens or lightens up on the piece. So
Stretches out eventually.
stretches out, yeah.
Because wool has
Interesting.
a lot of give.
Yeah.
And
So when you're
movement.
weaving, you know, especially if it's loose, then if you're moving up on your piece, then those strands are just going to be hanging like this rather than they should be like that.
Right.
So if you know your
can't-
tension is loose when you warp up, is that you know you have to work your ass off to get that piece finished.
Yeah.
But if it's so tight that you can't move that middle bar down, then you have to wait till it's ready to move. Or you could bust your middle
Okay.
bar, which Buddy and I did one time. Luckily, well, I probably did when we were in the studio, and luckily Buddy was there. So our middle bar was probably 4 or 5 feet long, but it was very, very narrow.
Right.
So all my warps, loops, all met on that middle bar.
Is that what a warp? A loop is loops
on
around the middle
a middle
bar.
bar, and then we're going over the middle bar and then down and
Gotcha.
then under. So that when I'm going back, they're all meeting and then going back onto the middle
Okay.
bar. So when I'm weaving, I weave up, and then I get hit too close to the top bar. I can move that middle bar down to bring all those blank warps on my side to weave. So we're moving that middle bar down. So when we did, the middle
Okay.
bar snapped in half. And I was in the middle of my, I think it was the SFU blankets. It snapped, and I just like screamed, and Buddy came over and he's like, "Oh my God."
Oh no.
That's
So
terrible.
yeah, so he went down to Rona or somewhere and got another dowel, and before taking the other one out, we fed the new one through there. So
With
we,
it at the same
yeah,
time,
and
so
had
you
to-
could like replace.
Yeah,
Strand,
every
it has to go
single-
through every single strand
Yeah.
in order to keep the tension.
Yeah, so there's one loop going this way coming from the bottom bar, but there's another one next to it coming because it's coming from the top bar. So they're both going in different directions, meeting on that middle bar.
Yeah.
So him and I were threading through each and every individual one so we didn't miss a loop.
Yeah.
But we fed it through and we didn't mess it up, but we still, it left us having to fix the tension again and spreading out the warps as to how my piece was on the loom already.
Right. Wow.
So there's some,
Skills.
yeah,
some-
stress.
There's
and-
stress, balance.
Yeah, you gotta.
And
Maybe
then
a little
it's
bit
hard on the body too because you're sitting there like this all day and you're either twilling or you're twining. So you're like that, right? And you're
Yeah.
going back and forth between like 5 or 6 feet this way and then back 5 or 6 feet that way.
Right.
So probably halfway through our projects, we all started getting sore shoulders and sore necks and sore backs, sore ankles, sore legs. So you're trying to get comfortable. a comfortable position to weave. So some of us ended up in physio
Yeah.
because of it. Yeah.
You know, I think it was Auntie Ira said that Eva, Mom's grandma, her hands were just massive from just constantly weaving all the time.
They're so strong.
Yeah.
Right? So the one thing I did find out when I went down that road to kind of learn the cedar weaving and stuff is, right from beginning, harvesting bark, processing it, going all the way through to the weaving part. The weaving is definitely, it's all about tension as well. It's all about balance. You got to make sure you get all your pieces of cedar equally balanced out when you're pulling them and cutting them. Learning to use a jerry stripper so you don't cut your fingers off. Lots of challenges.
You must be a really
balance
patient
and
person.
It is exercise.
I can go out and
patience to
harvest
work
it.
Yeah.
But with a male, because sometimes if it gets stuck, you need somebody strong, but then you also need somebody tall.
Yeah.
If it gets snagged on
So
a
way up
branch.
there.
Branches
Yeah.
high up. Yep.
Yeah. And I can, it could sit there for a year and then I can soak it and I can put it through the jerry stripper. And I'm, at one point I learned how to split it.
Yeah.
But I guess my stopping point and my barrier is creating with it. Because I don't do it enough. I'm not comfortable in that part yet. But I haven't been out harvesting for probably 4 years now, so I don't have any cedar right now. And hopefully I will. I think it's all doing the job that I have, because I used to go out harvesting to use in my positions when I was working in the schools too. So.
Well, and your focus has gone to wool weaving.
Yeah.
And it consumes a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what weaving we pick up, I think it makes it harder to, because I sew as well. And, it's a lot to balance out big projects.
Yeah,
and
one
things that are
project
going on.
after the other. Yeah.
Do you love it when you're doing it?
Which?
Like weaving? Do you just or do you look forward to being like, I know I'm going to have 2 hours to sit down or 4 hours to sit down? Or are you just kind of like...
My
meh?
mindset has changed since the beginning.
Yeah.
For sure. Because now after creating such huge projects, if I pick up commission that's going to be 5 feet by 6 feet, I know how much work it's going to be.
Oh, so you're like
I'm
thinking
not
about
as
that.
motivated as I used to be to create a piece, or sometimes it takes me a long time to do it,
Right.
to create, because I know I can only handle so much at the loom now, and then I have to quit because of my shoulders especially.
So do you enjoy teaching others because you get to see
Now
them?
I do. I think that's where my spirit is today, is in the teaching and sharing my knowledge, because you look at the project that I'm out there sharing right now is the wool woven quarter bag, which Sitalton, Norman Guerrero was the language teacher at that time, and probably 2006, 2007, he was teaching the language at Norgate. And there was a teacher that was, her classroom was down the hallway, who was retiring that year. And actually she was his teacher when he went to school. So they were teaching in the same school. And we were both in the language room one day during a break, and she came into the classroom and she said, I'm cleaning out my cupboards. And she said, I came across this magazine. It was like a 1960s macrame magazine. And she had this page open and she said, look at the project I found. And it was the quarter bag, or was a bag on cardboard. It wasn't called the quarter bag. And she said, I was weaving, so I was very new to weaving. I had a few pieces that I'd made, and I was just teaching Norman how to weave at that time as well. So she said, I thought I'd bring this project to you and see if you guys would want to do it, or, create something.
Wow.
So we looked at it, and if you ever seen an old magazine like that, they're just like hand-drawn sketches of the loom and not very detailed instructions. So we figured out how to set up the cardboard and how to warp it up. And I was just going to weave regular 2-strand twining in plain colors, right? That's how the bags were in the pictures.
Yeah.
And then Norman was like, no. He said, you're a weaver, you know how to do pattern and design, put pattern and design on there.
Right.
So I put diamonds and triangles on there. But when I prepped the cardboard and I did the math with the number of warps on there, the because the diamonds and triangles are even number of warps. I think I had 22 on there or something like that. It didn't accommodate the pattern. So again, it's just something I never thought of, is like I have to do the math first, and I have to have enough warps to accommodate the pattern. So I had to cut another cardboard, and then I had the pattern or the number of warps on there to accommodate the pattern. So I knew how to do the diamonds and triangles on a blanket, but if you look at the bag, it's woven around and around the cardboard. So if I wove on this side and this side, it would be just two pieces. So I had to figure out how to weave on the side and add the diamonds on the side of the cardboard at the same time. So eventually I figured it out, and that bag's probably 12 inches by 10 inches, I guess. Blue and white and a dark blue was my first bag.
Wow.
Which I still have. So to keep the continuity of the pattern, I have a red and a black and a white one, a turquoise, black and white, and I found some old Cowichan wool in a old store, and I was just enough, so I did another bag with that pattern on there too.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was my our first experience with the bag, and then we incorporated it and taught it at Norgate. Was the first school that we brought that project into. Then it kind of spread out to all the other schools in the district where our kids were.
Yeah.
Where they had language.
It sounds like a skill where you need to really put the time in. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I guess all skills are like that, but it just sounds like a skill that you really need to put the time in.
But it's been a very popular project since then. I've been out there teaching it since that time that the project was brought to us. But now that you look at how many people are out there teaching it, and some have created curriculum, and I'm always asking them, well, who was your teacher? Who taught you how to do this? And nobody really knows the foundation of where it actually began was with Norman and I in 2006, 2007.
Right.
And it's really hurtful to me, right? Because there are people out there teaching it that, at that time when we offered it, they were like, no, it's not from our culture. It's not part of our culture. And I'm like, well, who cares? It's in a magazine, right? And it's weaving.
Yeah.
They were weaving. This was 1960, so it was created before I was born. There were weavers that were non-Indigenous that were weaving back then.
Well, the weaving techniques, when you look at, like, our people were long-term weavers, and they were always weavers. Some of the loss and reconnection to those skills it took time to reestablish some of these things too, right? I was, when my mom passed, I was sitting there with other family, and I mean, I knew my grandmother was a weaver, but we didn't have a lot of pictures of her. So we have a picture of her cutting fish, and she's wearing her cedar hat. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, that's a cedar hat. She would have woven that cedar hat. It was just a very squared off hat that came down very simply, and likely that was what she wore when she went out harvesting, or she was out in the sun, or she was
personal
it was her
piece.
Personal work piece, like her piece that she took everywhere.
Yeah.
So, when I look at the techniques and those ways of how weaving is done, and I mean, especially with cedar weaving, they have a lot of different things that they've incorporated now, and I see people using quite wide strips. They're weaving basket weave style, and then they force it into the hat shape and kind of bring it around, and they've made something work. But I think the skills of pulling those weaving things, why when you picked it up it was easy, it came to you. Same when I picked up doing cedar weaving, it wasn't as complicated. I grasped what those things were because it almost the generational memory was working through, kind of naturally coming to those skills, right? But I think that when you look at the way those old drawings were, they came from some way of weaving too. And, our people were selling baskets and doing those things all through residential school times, and a lot of that stuff was picked up from non-Indigenous people who also reinvented something, right? They talk a lot about those things. Syllabics language and the symbolism. Back in Cree territory, they have very famous origin stories about the ministers coming to take their original charts. And they talk a lot about the creation of that language, because I don't know if it's Presbyterian Church or one of them says that they were the ones that created the language for the for the people. And so origins are up for discussion, and our history in terms of where those come from are not as clear, finding those providences, I think,
Yeah, and I've seen those European looms that look like big, huge organs or pianos. Have you ever seen them?
Yes.
So I was doing a demo at Minova Museum one night, and it was time for closing the evening.
Yeah.
So a lot of the other people that were there doing demos had already packed up and left, and I was in no rush because my daughter works there and she had to help clean up before we were able to leave. So I was just sitting there doing some weaving, and this older lady and her daughter came towards my table, and she said, "Oh no, did we miss it?" And I said, "Yeah, everybody just packed up and left." I said, "I'm just waiting for my daughter. That's why I'm not in a rush." So she introduced me to her mom, and she was probably in her 80s. I think she was closer to 90. And she explained to me that she was a weaver. And she used to weave her own clothes, and she did this in like the 40s and 50s. And so her mom, like when she saw my table, I had all my pieces on the table, and that's what caught her eye and captured her eye. So she came rushing over to my table. So I was having a conversation with her about it, and then she kind of wandered off to another table that was beside me when somebody was packing up, I think. And then she explained to me that her mom was she was in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's. So she said she has this loom and she has all this wool and all these books and equipment. She said, "I'm just trying to figure out what to do with it because it's just in their garage." And I think it had been there for a long time.
Wow.
So she was asking me, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Well, if you're giving it away."
Yeah.
And she said, "Yeah." And so I said, "Yeah, we can come pick it up tomorrow." So it was in North Van here. So I went up to her mother's home in the evening that next day.
Yeah.
And she pulled all of her looms, her magazines, and her wool and everything out, and her mom knew was something up. Right, she was wondering what was going on. "What are you doing with this?" So it was question after question for her, she said.
Yeah.
So she brought me into the home, and she was showing me all of the stuff that she had taken out, and her mom sat beside me, and she started talking about weaving. So I was having a conversation with her about weaving, and she's like, "This is amazing." Her daughter, she said, now somebody can sit with her and they'll know what she's talking about, because she said, "I don't know what she's talking about."
Right.
But I said, she said, "My mom has made these amazing pieces over her lifetime when she was a weaver." So she was showing me some of these pictures that she had in an album, and they're gorgeous pieces. And she said she still has one of her first sweaters that she made on that loom. So, and it was in storage, so she went and got it, and it was all packaged up. And it was this beautiful purple sweater with long sleeves, and it went down to past her knees, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, "Oh my God, how do you do this?" Right?
Incredible.
Yeah, and it was just on this little loom that she's had for decades.
Wow.
So it's still sitting in my house. I don't know how to use it.
Wow.
But I really love it because you can see the age of the loom.
Yeah.
And my daughter works at Minova, so they have this tourism challenge every year. So they get this booklet of all of these places to hit in the Lower Mainland, and you go to these places, and they have like 2 or 3 different questions that you have to go out and answer, and then you go bring it back to the front, and they give you a stamp or 2 for it. So if they collect stamps, they're in
I've
for
heard
these
of
draws.
this. Yeah.
So that's what my daughter does. So this is our second year doing it. So we decided to go to different places. So we went to the Surrey Museum, and of all places, it's in Cloverdale, which I've been to many times, but I didn't know it was there.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a beautiful building. So we were walking around, And then we went upstairs, and my daughter said, look there's some looms there. It's just one room just full of all these European huge looms.
Wow.
So that's where I gravitated to right away. And then just next door to it must have been an Indigenous person's place, because there was a loom sitting there, and then they had a blanket on a mannequin tied up on there. But the room was locked because I tried to go in there. I wanted to look at the piece, but there was nobody there at that time.
Right.
Wow.
So we went into that other space where all those other looms were set up, and there was a young Asian girl. She was a volunteer there, was having a conversation with four or five other non-Indigenous people that were asking all these questions, because they had this wall just full of drawers, and this lady, I can't remember what her name is, had donated all of these looms there and these pieces to that museum, because
Wow.
she was been weaving all her life, and just telling their stories. And I was trying to stand there all patient until I got her attention to ask her as well, right? But to me, in my mind, it was like, these people are taking too long. So I had to go and interrupt them, right? And I said, well, can you show me and explain how these looms work? Because they were just talking about the pieces that she had donated, but I
Yeah.
wanted to learn about the looms.
Yeah.
So I had to cut them off and say, I want to know how to use
Tell me
these. Like,
Over here, please.
yes,
Over here,
yes,
please.
because I was so impatient,
Yeah.
right? I was so excited because they were all warped up,
Yeah.
and they all had pieces on there. And yeah, I said, I really want to know how these work, because there was a couple of smaller ones in the corner there that were similar to the one that I have,
Right.
but they were a little bit different. They were a little bit more modern to today.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so we probably spent a good 45 minutes having a conversation. Once she learned that I was a weaver, and I showed her some of my pieces that I had on my phone, and so we were both just like question after question. And so it was really interesting learning about those types of looms that, I mean, one would just fill up this whole space here. That's how big one of them was.
Wow.
Right. So, and then it's like some of them are mechanical. I watch them online. Some are mechanical, and some have pedals that you hit two of them and it lifts them up, and the shuttle goes through, and then you let that go and it goes back. But just the patterns that they create on those looms is just amazing.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It is amazing what they can do. But I'm like, I don't know why they invented looms like that, because ours is so much simpler to use compared to that. Because I've watched people, they say thread the loom, because they have all these metal rods, like hundreds of them, depending on the size of the loom, that have a rod there, and then just this little pinhole on the end.
Right. I've seen that.
So they're warping. I call it warping, but they call it dressing the loom.
Okay.
And they're just pulling all of those threads one by one through there. That's what they're
Wow.
creating, all of those hundreds of
Right.
warps on there. Yeah. So I learned a lot just in that time that I spent with her. But I said, I'm so glad and honored to finally see something like this, because I said, I've always wondered, because I only see it on YouTube or on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I'm not actually watching
In
it.
front of you. Yeah.
Yeah, and the terminology, because some of them share so much. I'm in a group called Weaving for something. I can't remember what the name of the group is, but I joined it, or for the sake of weaving, I think that's what it's called. But they're weavers from all over the world that are part of that group, and there's just so many amazing weavers on there. And I said, I've watched some of them are very short, but watching different parts of them prepping and weaving on the loom. Yeah.
I could sit here and listen to you talk about this forever. Literally forever.
But oddly, after that experience, we went to Victoria for work one year. This is probably before 2010. And we went into this, not a gift shop, but an artist shop or gallery. And it was owned by this young non-native girl there. And she had all these pieces in there. So again, being really inquisitive, asking all these questions about the artists and the pieces, and just struck up a friendship with her at that time. And then I think we were both so intrigued with each other. We added each other on Facebook. So that was kind of just how I saw a post from her, and she saw a post from me. And one of her posts popped up within like the last month. She's a Canadian citizen, but she moved to Mexico City, and she became a citizen there. So she put this post on there. It was like, there's so many amazing weavers in Mexico. And she said, and that brought me back to the time that you and I met and we were talking about my experience with weaving.
Yeah.
But we really haven't connected since then. So she said, you know, what I'm looking at is doing an exchange with weavers from Mexico City and Squamish here. And then I've been so busy. I said, you know, I would really like to be a part of that, right? Is going to see weaving from other countries and nationalities. But she phoned me this morning, and I picked her call up, and she was asking if I remembered her. And I said, I see your posts all the time. I remember you very well. You worked in Victoria. She said, but she's been living in Mexico for 10 years now.
Wow.
But she said she misses the connections and the knowledge and the people that she'd met here in BC. So we had a huge conversation about it, and looking at doing an exchange with her with 4 people from here and 4 people from there.
That would be
here,
awesome.
and
Wow.
learning about and seeing their techniques and their weaving.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
That would be
As I said,
so.
I've been thinking about this for years because I see it all over social media, the different types and techniques and language and terminology with weaving, right? And you always wonder, is like, how in the heck?
Yeah. That'd be sweet.
Yeah. So her and I had a conversation this morning.
When are you guys thinking about doing that?
Well, she has the knowledge of creating grants.
Yeah.
So she'll work on that part of it. And I was just talking to my daughter this morning, and she has her own skills in a different area. So of course she wants to be on board of being like kind of sharing the work that Minova Museum does with the woolly dog and the history of the mountain goat and all of that. And then we're kind of thinking of, you know, who else has different types of knowledge of plants and dyes, and somebody that's very cultural that can tell stories and legends and stuff like that. So we thought of Alice Gus and her daughter. I don't know if that's Gwen's daughter, Alice
Yes.
Suecia.
Yeah.
Her and
Yeah.
her daughter, Monique, who works up in
She talked about Alice when we were up there
the
today.
center in Whistler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we haven't talked to them yet, but I want to approach them to see if they're interested. Then we kind of have to look for grants to do that, to fly over and stay for a couple of weeks and meet weavers there and just have conversation and share different techniques of weaving and skill and.
Yeah.
And eat good food.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. We were just talking about it this morning. So
That'd be
my
amazing.
daughter's great at doing research, so I've left that part up to her to do that research of possibility of cultural grants and.
See, I feel the same role. I feel the same role here.
Yeah.
Would you like to be a guest on Our Storytellers? Because all you have to do to connect with us is just email info@ourstorytellers.ca, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. That sounds like a voicemail, which I think is hilarious. But if you email us, we'll give you a call and we'll listen to your story, and we'll probably film it. So please reach out to us if you're interested in being a guest, because we love to share stories from all walks of life, from all different experiences. We think that everybody's story is valuable and that you can learn from anybody's story. So please email us, and we'll schedule a call with you as soon as we can. That also sounds like a voicemail, but back to the podcast.
So we ask this to every single guest that comes on the Our Storytellers podcast, but the first question is, what do you want people in our generation to start doing today?
Wow, I've never been asked that actually. I guess looking back at my own lived experiences is what I didn't learn that I had to start learning on my own is I have a really bad memory. I need everything written down. I need to see it visually. Is the family tree. I don't have the memory for that. You know, whereas I wish I could go out and say, you know, I know my mom, I know my dad, I know their parents, but beyond that is like that I can't remember. So, you know, to me, that's really important, is to know who you are and where you come from. Because in a sense, you know, working in the education system for so long, is that, you know, even later in life when I had to start that journey on my own, it kind of made me prouder of who I am and where I come from now that I know, right?
Mhm.
Now I have the gift of wool weaving at the same time. I need to, you know, had to do my own research in that area because, like you'd mentioned earlier, was that nothing is put in writing around here, or it's not shared, you know. So looking at whatever is created for our own people, is that we should have access to it, because how are our kids going to learn without those opportunities of whatever is created? It should be shared out there, not, in my opinion, held within certain departments or by certain people. To me, that's stingy.
Mhm.
We all should have access to it because we all come from it and we all belong to it either way, right?
Mhm.
We've lived with a century and a half of an imposed withholding of our, and hiding of our culture, our language, disconnection, you know. So yeah, it fostering
I think creating
more
change
open
for our
relationship.
new generations, yeah, is having that open access, but relationships. And what, you know, what I'd found really difficult when I was working with the nation is introducing our kids to our culture and to our language. Not only, I'm not going to say it's not only the longhouse or Sion, because that's not culture. That's not the only part of our culture. It is the cedar weaving, it is the wool weaving, it is hunting, it's fishing, it's preparing,
Being
harvesting,
alive.
gathering, transportation. And that's all I talk about when I, you know, present and facilitate in my workshops, because we come from all of that.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah,
Our
from-
village site's the name of our communities prior to what we see today, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, in our ceremonies and things, we had sweats, we had pipes, we had, ceremonies throughout our winter seasons and summer. There's so many, so much of that side of things that are having, I don't know if they've been lost, but they've been certainly covered or hidden in
Or not
so many
shared,
ways.
right?
Yeah,
Because
or
in
shared.
my day when I was even in my day when I was growing up, there was nothing ever talked about or any conversations about culture or language or relatives or anything like that. We
Yeah.
just automatically knew who we were related to then, but it was not common conversation back then. And it was just something that was passed down, because working with the education department for 22 years, our own students didn't know who you related to in the same room. You know,
Yeah.
that's what dawned on us in probably 2009. You know, we were having a conversation about family trees and lineage, and you know, this is foreign language to our kids because it's not being talked about at home.
Mhm.
But then I looked
Right.
around the room and I looked at Norman and I said, there's 12 of us in this room that come from the Jacobs family. But some of them had different names, last names. I said, I wonder if they know if they're related.
That they're actually
Yeah.
quite closely related.
Yeah.
And
So Norman did my family tree on 3 pieces of paper, which I still have. It's hanging in my office. And then sure enough, he explained, this is where your line comes, this is yours, this is mine, this is Angie's, and so 12 of us were on the bottom of that paper.
Wow.
And then we went, did you even know that you were related? And some of them did, but some of them didn't. And I'm so like, now, and we knew the relationships that they had with each other, some of them. It was like, now you know that you're related, you need to be looking after each other and not being mean towards each other, because that was a real history with some of them.
Yeah.
Be kind.
Yeah,
Our,
so
our
those-
first teachings are kindness and compassion.
Yeah, so that's what we
Yeah.
were started is the teaching about this is how we treat the ones that we're related to.
Wow.
You know, what's so interesting is sitting here interviewing so many matriarchs from the nation is that you really begin to see just how related everybody is. You know,
Yeah,
And
it's
then
important. And like I said, I need it visually, so I'm glad I have that tree
yeah.
hanging in my office, because some of those
Yeah.
names that go back on my tree are Squamish names. They're not even English names.
Mm.
Exactly. They were still their traditional names.
Yeah.
And some of them are still listed as unknown as well.
Yeah,
They'll list the man's name, but the woman's is missing.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
history, it's not anybody's fault. It's just a stem from residential school.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something that my parents were not
They're
provided
there
or given.
somewhere,
Yeah.
right? They're there
It's just
somewhere.
somebody has to have that motivation like I did. Is like, mine was education. Like I knew my kids had to have an education.
Yeah.
And they, it was an uphill battle with my son, but I said, you're graduating whether you like it or not, right? And then he would bring his report cards home, and they all would say the same thing. Grade 12 came, they were not going to give his report card out because he was short a couple of credits from automotive, which was not one of his favorite classes.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was at Sutherland in a program there, and the women that were there I went and talked to before he walked through those doors. So they were huge advocates for him. So when his teacher was not going to give him like 1 or 2 credits, they were banging down his door and said, why would you make him come back to you for 6 months when you guys don't even get along?
Mm.
So he gave them the passing grade, and he got his report card. So he brought it home to me, and I, because I work for the nation, I said, you need to be an advocate for yourself, because I can't go in there and advocate for you, because it was a picture that was painted by some of the community and staff, right, as I'm there protecting my own children.
Yeah.
So I raised them. I said, you need to use your own voices,
Yeah.
which they did. So when he came home and he showed me his report card, he said, I got my report card. And I said, okay, fine. I said, congratulations. And he said, well, aren't you going to look at it? And I said, why should I? It's going to say everything that it said in your previous report cards. So he doubted me. So I opened it up. Sure enough, it said very capable but not applying himself.
Mm.
So I said, how different is this from grade 10? Same comments as grade 10. I knew he was very, very, very capable and smart, but he didn't fit within that system, the education system.
True.
Right. Yes.
So when he took the post-secondary assessment, which was part of getting funding back then,
Yeah.
it was very difficult for some of our members, because they would be strong in one sense of the assessment and weak in the other, which
Right.
really affected their score for funding, right? And I didn't really like that.
Oh.
They would get 50 or they'd get 51% because of part of the other assessment, right?
Right.
So I brought my son. I said, you're going to take this assessment for post-secondary funding. That's all I told him. I said, because you're going to go back to school. So at that time, the assessment was provided, the space was provided up at Hamilton, Old Hamilton School. So I brought him up there one day in the morning at like 10 o'clock, and I dropped him off, and I said, I'll pick you up at 10 or 12. And he said, this is where it is? And I said, I guess so. Walk through those doors and ask somebody where the space is, right? So I'm not going to go in there with you. So he did. He walked away and went in through the doors. And then after that, we had a conversation and asked him how it was. And he said, oh, it was fine. He said, but, I had to look for the place, and I didn't bring any pencil or pen or eraser or anything. And I said, well, that's what you get, because you should look at this before. He knew he was going, right? What you needed before you went into the assessment.
Mm.
I said, so strike one on your part, not mine. And then he said he went and walked into the classroom, and there was like 10 or 12 other Squamish members in there. And one person that he knew was Maria Johnson at that time. So he went and sat with her, and he sat there, and he's like, oh, so what's going on here? What is all this? And she looked at him, and she's a very prepared person. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? This is the post-secondary assessment. And he's like, well, what is that? And she was explaining to him what it was. And
This is giving me brotherly flashbacks right now.
yeah. She was like, didn't you prepare? You could have gotten a package that prepared you for this assessment to tell you what was on there and what to prepare for, like math or English or writing or whatever. And he said no, and she's like, "You're crazy." And he even had to borrow a pencil from her, so she was just giving him shit there. And, but he took the assessment, and I picked him up and asked him how it went, and he said fine. And then we waited down the road for the results. Who Rosalind Williams was a post-secondary counselor at that time.
Right.
Her office was just kitty corner to mine, and she got the results from I don't know where they came from. But she, as soon as she looked over them, heard her, and she came running into my office, and she was shaking his grades there, and she said, "I have my doctor." So he scored over 98% on the assessment.
Good for him.
Which I said I knew, and I went and shared that with him at home. I said, I knew you were at this level. It's just that he didn't give a shit about school, right?
Right.
But in my mind, I said I needed to know how capable you were. So he's back into our university now. He's going to CapU for in the kinesiology program.
Nice.
So he's doing very, very well in it.
Yeah.
And my daughter has her bachelor's in family counseling and social work
Nice.
and is in the language program. So, but when I went back to school at 50, they weren't really doing anything. But my daughter was working as the receptionist with ComOps at the time. And when she saw me, I went back to school. I was working. I was home, being a wife, being a grandmother, and working full time. She came to me one day and she said, "What do you think if I went back to school?" And I said, "Absolutely. You don't want to be stuck here all your life. There's so much more out there." Yeah. And then my son ended up marrying Maria. It's his wife today. And she's a teacher in the West Van School District.
Oh yeah.
So my grandkids have very big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
We all have our degrees.
Is she
But
still
you
giving
learn
him
by
shit?
what you see and hear, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you
If it's
do,
not
yeah.
being talked about in the homes, certainly we did try and do what we could in the school system, but it all comes down to parents being motivated, teaching, and being that example to their children.
A role model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
makes such a big difference.
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
What does ceremony mean to you today?
Probably prior to 2006, ceremony wasn't a huge part of my life because when I moved home, I ended up taking care of my parents until they both passed away. During that time, it was like when I moved home, my mom passed away within 2 years of me moving home. My dad got really ill, and looking after both of them certainly took a toll on my mom. But then when she passed away, it was my first real time in my life that I'd lost somebody so close to me. And then my dad got sick again. So it was like there was no time for anything other than work and all the other responsibilities as a parent, a person. But when we lost my dad, it was like I was so angry, right? I didn't really have any time to mourn because there was a lot of family stuff and drama going on at that time as well. And then, whatever happened during that time, I had a connection to our longhouse because my sister was initiated in 1990s. I had that connection a little bit, but not very strong. But after losing my dad and all of the other drama that had happened, and personally within my own being, I knew that's where I belonged. So I got myself initiated in 2006. And that was really what opened my eyes and my heart and the doors to spirituality, because I didn't know what it was. Because my parents were not, my mom and my grandmother on that side were very religious, but through Christianity.
Christianity, yeah.
And that was not for me, right? I knew that, but once I was initiated into our Sion, that really began my healing journey. That's where it began, of a different way of being taught of what prayer really meant, rather than what I saw in my life, right? Was the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So different teachings coming from so many different knowledge keepers in that life. And I had some really amazing teachers who were, some of them have passed on now. But I'm still very involved in our winter ceremonies that way. So that's what really grounded me, and that's where all the teachings that I share out there, even when I was working within the nation, trying to work with family and students and RCMP and social workers. So, all of these people that were involved in all of our kids' lives, the teachings that came out on that floor, continue to come out on that floor, are very important to me. And that's how I was taught and learned to share all of that, be non-judgmental, sharing the teachings and knowledge in a good way, because a lot of the families, sometimes those teachings or no teachings at all come out, right? So that, to me, spirituality is the foundation of where our lives began, was, in our longhouse prior to what we see today, because I'm assuming that's what happened in our traditional longhouse. So I guess I got very humbled with spirituality at that time. And I'm, very proud of that part of my life. But although, because it's like a secret society, it's not like I can go out and share all of that out in the outside of those four walls, right? But the foundation of the teachings that come out are not ours to hold on to, right? I do share a little bit of those teachings out there, but not much, because I always explain they belong to us and not anybody else.
Yeah.
And try and explain it to them in terms that they'll understand.
Yeah.
But mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read this book?
I have, but I
Yeah.
have to reread it now, because through the master's program I read so many other. I have a collection,
Yeah.
shelf full of collection of books that we had to read over those years in there, and then now my daughter is an avid reader, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I love reading books too, but I've read this book a couple times, and I always say, like, I try to give that book to somebody who doesn't understand an Indigenous worldview, and to them it's just some racist archivist taking in information from a Indigenous person who says not, like, who's just saying what it was like. But to me, and to Mom, and to all of us, like you have to know the worldview in order to understand where it's coming from in the first place, so.
The one that I just started reading was the one that the Nation put out during
Yeah.
amalgamation.
How did you find that?
I'm just in the first 20 pages of it right now.
I crushed
so.
that book before we started this project. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me know. I want to hear what you have to say.
I
about
have
it.
a lot of highlights in there about it, but yeah, that's about it yet. So I haven't gotten through it yet.
Curious
So.
to hear what people's feedback is.
Yeah.
As to how they feel.
But what I always find out, if I'm going to look at a project or something that is put in writing, to me, because I sit on the CHIA committee as well here, creating our laws. To me, I always encourage that if any project is done, I said, quit going back to the same people all the time. There's so many other members that have so much knowledge and teachings and history. Because I said, I'm tired of looking at all of our posts and documents, and it's the same people in there all the time, right? It's like, I always say, spread the wealth. Because we have so many other members that want to have those opportunities and experiences as well. But we're just so prone to go back to the same old within our nation.
Definition of insanity.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over
And I'm
over,
hoping
expecting a
that
different
through
result.
youth it's different, right? Is like not depend on the same person at this age, in this certain age group or this age group or family, because to me that's how it's been forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want somebody with an open mind and an open heart to lead our people and be kind to everybody and include everybody, because it's not that way today,
Yeah, I think we see some definite slanted behaviors in terms of the way they conduct things and do that. There almost is no room to hear all families that should exist within this.
Yeah,
right?
well, even very biased with education. I've been involved in education for 40 years out of my life, but I'm not part of anything that happens within the nation. Right?
Yeah.
Never called back and to contribute or anything.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're so biased in who they lean on because, for whatever reason, and I look at some of the departments within our nation. I was like, how many of you have ever had employment off reserve? Your whole career's been on reserve. How do you know what's happening out there?
Mm-hmm.
How can you be a person to contribute to that when you've been confined to this place for so many years?
I've never thought about that before. That makes sense.
Because I've been all over. I worked with the nation, I worked within the nation, but I also worked outside at all of these schools in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
And now it's like across the Lower Mainland, all over BC now, right?
Yeah, you get to see a wider exposure to different things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's because of just how powerful my voice is at the table, because I'm not kind when it comes to advocating for the most vulnerable members in our community.
Yeah.
And that's what they seem to forget, right? Even within our own staff meetings sometimes, I had to remind them the projects that they were wanting to do is like, how is this going to benefit all of them? It's benefiting you because it's your gift, I understand that. But that's not why we're here. We're not here for ourselves, we're here for our members. That's what they seem to forget.
That's what fiduciary duty is about, right?
Yeah.
You got to look after the most vulnerable so that nobody's left behind in
And
pulling
for
up
some
things.
reason, I don't get why they don't know that or remember that.
Because they're colonized.
Yeah.
They have a Western Eurocentric colonized, way of being raised.
And I think that's part of why they've never worked outside of the community.
Well, of course,
they don't know.
because it becomes they get locked in myopic with that,
Makes sense. I never thought of that.
and then it's hard to see out of it because they don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
It's not that is what they're doing wrong? Probably not. In some level, and you get enough outside support from agencies that plug in to that narrow place, so it's like, oh well, why isn't that normal? Why isn't that appropriate? Why isn't that okay? Because there isn't a way of thinking outside of that, and they've never had to, so it does lend itself to being problematic, right? I think.
Yeah, so that's probably part of it. I was just so brutally honest when I was working for the nation as well, and
So
hurt
was
some
I. It
people's-
didn't last
hurt
long.
some people's
Now you're
feelings.
not leaned on.
Yeah. But I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't go through all the experiences I went through in life. It's like whatever, the teaching that I've heard is Creator doesn't throw anything your way that you cannot handle. And
Do I say that all the time? I say that all the time.
Yeah, and I've gotten
and I
through
say
so
that
many.
sometimes he's an asshole. So I really do have a line where it stops and it's like, no, I'm sorry. There is
Something
there
I
is
can't
the
handle.
ability to push it too far.
Yeah.
So there is that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's always, but there is always that opportunity where it gets to be too much.
Love that saying though.
Yeah.
I love it.
I wouldn't be here if I wasn't that way.
Yeah.
Because you look at earlier in my career working with the nation and getting settled in, nothing but males in the district with those top levels before.
Yeah.
Would you like to dedicate this podcast to anybody?
Oh, wow. That would be difficult. I guess my main mentors and teachers would have been my parents. And then two that followed very closely who I wanted to follow in their footsteps were my late Auntie Terry and my Auntie Julie, because they both had their masters, and that was one of my huge goals in life, was like I want to be like my aunties and earn my degree. It took me a long time, but I did get it. And my husband and my children, because it's this life and everything that I do, I spend a lot of time away from my family, and then especially with winter, sometimes I'm not even home during the winter time, so. They put up with a lot, and there are a lot of gaps, but they've learned to live with it, and they just know that's who I am. Because I don't think I would be happy not doing what I'm doing today. I would be so damn bored if I didn't. I need something. I always need something to do.
I feel that.
Yeah.
The one thing we've seen a lot of with our women when we sit with them is just the work ethic of all of our women is their drive is incredibly strong. And it's just persevering, keep going, and there is no
Hit a hurdle, just get over it and move
oh,
on.
just it's a bump in the road, keep
Yeah.
going. You're gonna pick up the rest of what you need along the way.
Yeah.
But it
yeah.
seems to be like an underlying real drive, and I think it's kind of a beautiful thing.
But you go back to that saying is like you learn what you see and what you hear, right? So you see others doing it. It's, you know,
Yeah.
I always say that in my workshops. If I capture one heart and one mind in that group of 150 people or whatever, I've done my job. I'm not
Doesn't
going
have
to
to be all
change
of them,
everybody.
just
Yeah,
need one.
yeah, just need one.
Well, you've captured mine today, so thank you very much for coming
I
on.
enjoyed this.
Yeah.
It's part of my
grateful
And-
for
job.
you.
Yeah.
And this is here, so if you ever need to come in and say something or want to come have conversations, you're more than welcome to use any of this. It belongs to the people, so if you ever need anything filmed when you're out and about, just let us know too.
Okay,
We'll
that
come.
would be great.
We'll come help you
Maybe it's Mexico.
out. Yes.
Yes, because you're talking about a weaving project.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I'll
It would be
have-
so amazing to document.